This is our second shir on Basi Ligani Tavshin Yutes. This is, of course, before Yud Shvat Tavshin Ayin Tes. So it's 60 years ago since the Rebbe said this Maimer, which means then the Rebbe was learning Basi Ligani the first time, and the focus was on Perek Tes. And we are learning Basi Ligani for the fourth time and focusing on Perek Tes. So the shir is in Basi Ligani Tavshin Yutes. The first shir that I gave, the last shir, was a very long introduction. And we also studied Perek Aleph, which is the review of the first 8 Krakim, and then Perek Vav. And what did we discuss? That you build a home for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you build a house for Hashem by engaging with and overcoming the world. And this Kafia V'Eshapcha, the overcoming the world, is demonstrated with 3 different examples. The first is Karbones. The second is the transformation of Shtus D'Liyumazeh into Shtus D'Gdusha. And the third is the transformation of the word Sheker into Keresh. The difference between these 3 explanations is that in the first explanation, the idea of transforming a carbon is not in the word carbon, but in the actual animal of the carbon. In the second idea, which is the transformation of Shtus D'Liyumazeh to the Shtus D'Gdusha, it's actually in the word Shitim. I'd say Shitim, the word Shitim and Shtus has to be transformed to Shtus D'Gdusha. And the third explanation, which is the transformation of Sheker into Keresh, he goes down to Oisius. He translates separately the letter Shin, the letter Kuf, and the letter Reish. And he proposes, based on Isaiah, that Kuf and Reish are Asvind is Chazion al Sitra Achara Inun, Sitra Bisha Inin, that the Kuf and the Reish, which are the opposite of the He and the Dal, they're Oisius of Klippa, and they need to be transformed into Kedusha. So the Rebbe taught us in Perek Vav of this Maimer the idea of Ga'ar Chayas Kone. That Kone is Kuf, which is Klippa, and you have to cut off the left leg of the Kuf and make it into a Hine, which is an Ois of Kedusha. So in the middle of Perek Tes, the Freirdike Rebbe in his Maimer brings this idea of Ga'ar Chayas Kone, and that marks the end of the sugya of the transformation of Kuf and Reish from Asius of Le'umazev, Asius of Bisha, to a Hey and a Dalid, which are Asius of Kedusha. Or in a different way, as it's written in the earlier Prakim and the earlier Maimorim, that it's to sustain the letters Kuf and Reish, but instead of it being Sheker, it becomes Keresh and Kesher. That the Oisius are continued to be used, but instead of being Oisius of Le'umazeh, they become Oisius of Kedusha, Oisius of the Beis HaMikdash. And one of the points that Rebbe made was that when you cut off the left leg of the Kuf now stands on 2 feet. And by the Kuf standing on 2 feet, it has a firmness to it, a certitude. It's not limping, it's not, hopping along. And this shows on a certain certainty. And therefore the Rebbe continues, after he explains the idea of Gar Chayas Kone, cutting off the left leg of the Kuf, so that the Kuf becomes a Hey, and Kone becomes Hine, which is in Yonim of Gedusha, he discusses the word Amida. Why does he discuss the word Amida? This is today's Shir, Perek Beis. Why does he discuss the word Amida? Because the discussion started in Perek Vav with Vasisa, K'rashim la Mishkan Atzei Shitim Eimdim, that they make K'rashim boards for the Mishkan, and of Atzei Shitim Eimdim that are standing upright. And the Rebbe argues that when the Oisius of Keresh are Klippa Oisius, it doesn't stand well. And standing is very important, as you're going to see soon. And when the Oisius of Keresh are healed and corrected, either by being transformed into different letters, or even if they remain the same letters, but they're transformed from how these letters are Oisius of Klippa, Sheker, to how these letters are Asius of Kedusha, Keresh, and Kesher, so then there is the inyan from K'rashim Eimdim, that they're standing upright and with a firmness and with a certitude. So this is what we're going to begin now. I just want to repeat one more time that the Perek of the Freirdike, the Perek Tes, which is actually quite a short Perek, starts off with the idea of Atzei Shitim Eimdim, and it finishes again with Atzei Shitim Oimdim, And in the middle, you have the idea of gar chayas kone. In other words, the cutting off of the left leg of the kuf, which I explained to you is the end of the sugya of the transformation of sheker to keresh. So the way I taught it to you, this brings to the idea of kashim eimdim, the opposite of klipas kedusha, and kedusha is the kashim are standing upright. But the way the Freirdike Rebbe presents it, first he begins to speak about kashim eimdim. He goes off to talk about gar chayas kon, and he comes back to kashim eimdim, which is how the maimer that we have in front of us is ordered. That's the arrangement in the maimer. We cheated, and we learned Perek Aleph, which is a review of the first 8 perakim, and we jumped to Perek Vav, which explains the idea of gar chayas kon, the correction of the kuf, making it into a hay, so that it should be oimdim, it should stand. And we're now prepared to discuss the idea of atzei shitim oimdim. And of course, what's the idea? Hashem has a Beis HaMikdash. And one of the features of the Beis HaMikdash is that it's kashim oimdim, the boards of the Beis HaMikdash are standing upright. And the kashim oimdim come from what? The kashim oimdim come from the transformation of klipa into kedusha. To build the Beis HaMikdash, you have to have atzei shitim, which is taking shtuz de liyumaz and making it into shtuz de kedusha, and it becomes kashim instead of sheker. The lie of Elam Hazeh becomes a board for the Beis HaMikdash, and when the lie of Elam Hazeh and the shtuz de liyumaz become shtuz de kedusha and a board for the Beis HaMikdash, it's called kashim eimdim. So first of all, the idea of keresh and kesher is a good thing. It's a holy thing. It's a positive thing. When you change over, when you struggle with and you transform klipa into kedusha, that's a good thing. But the reward, the dividend, the specific inyan that comes out from transforming sheker into keresh and shtuz de liumaz and the shtuz de kedusha is the inyan of amida. And this is how Perek Beis of our maimer begins, the Rebbe's maimer, which of course is based on the Freirdike Rebbe's maimer in the beginning. V'hine, v'hamaimer b'siftas. I'm reading it inside, page Samachei. If you have this, I think is from Melukot. I made my copies of Melukot, but you can get them either in Sefer Mamorim Basi Ligani or Sefer Mamorim Melukot. B'hamaimer b'siftas mavai. Chapter 9 begins. Shezehu, that the idea that you've transformed klipa into kedusha, from shtuz to shtuz to kedusha, and from sheker to keresh, the result of that is, the reward for that is, gamkein masha k'roshim nikroyim b'shem imdim. That what was before sheker, that's now keresh, is able to stand up. Meaning to say, so long as it's sheker ein lei raglayim. Long as it's a lie, sheker can't stand. Right? The Rebbe brings the maimer, kushta koi, emes stands. Sheker ein lei raglayim, sheker has no feet. But when you transform sheker into klipa, however you do it, whether you change the ACS, gar chayas kone, or you retain the ACS, but you rearrange them that they become ACS of kedusha, rather than ACS of klipa, so now it can stand. So krashim means the sheker becomes keresh, and not only is it a good thing that the sheker becomes keresh, but the consequence of this good thing, that from sheker you have keresh, is that the mile of amida, that are standing upright. Or K'meisha Kasu, but it's brought in the Pasuk, Vasisa Sakrashim La Mishkan, when the Eibishter commanded Moshe Rabbeinu to command the Jewish people to build the boards for the Beis HaMikdash, they're called Atzei Shitim. They're made from boards of Shitim, which of course was Prakim Gimel Dal and Hey, Shtuz Dil Umaz and Shtuz Dil Kedusha, and then Eimdim, they're standing upright. Now before we continue, I just want to share a basic idea. When you learn in Chassidus, in this Maimer, and this Maimer, and this Maimer, about the variety of different positions that a human being could be in, you have laying, and you have sitting, and you have standing, and you have walking, and you have jumping, and you have broad jumping. It's the whole different levels. And each one is a different maimer d'matzah. Yeah? Laying down is the lowest level, or as the Rebbe says in once in the Fabrengen edition of Nun Beis, the highest level. Sitting down, of course, is better than laying down, and standing is better than sitting down. Because when one is sitting, the higher parts of the body are lowered, the head has been lowered. And when people would sit, they put their legs up on a footstool, which means the legs would be raised above the ground. And when a person stands, the head is higher up, and the feet is lower down. So the phenomenon of Amida, the idea of standing, in Kedusha means standing from a very high place to a very low place. Because the head is in the heavens, therefore the feet are planted firmly on the ground. We also have, of course, the idea which is brought in Chassidus, Chai Havaya Sharamadati Lafonav, that the idea of standing upright denotes, it indicates a bittul in front of the Eibishter, in front of whom one stands. So the effect of transforming Atzei Shitim into Kroshim, the effect of transforming Sheker into Keresh is a Davai Lav Amida. And the Rebbe says, Umavayir, and the Rebbe Rayatz explains, the Eimdim Hunyan Amudim, the notion of Amudim, Eimdim, of standing, means Amudim. Amudim can mean columns, that means poles, and Amudim could mean beams, like beams of light. They're both included in the same word, because that's what an Amud means. An Amud means a column that holds a building's ceiling up, and Amud means a beam of light which shines from one place to another. And you'll see momentarily that the word K'roshim Oimdim, Atzei Shitim Oimdim, is going to be interpreted in both ways. It means a column, a beam which holds up a floor, a ceiling, and it means a beam of light which shines from heaven to earth. Because the word Oimdim and the word Amudim is the same letters. The letters are just rearranged. You move the vav from before the mem to after the mem. Instead of being a verb, it becomes a noun. The noun of columns or pillars or beams. It says in Gemara that it means, in other words, that these boards of shitim are standing upright. The Eimdim Hunyan Ma'amidim, it's making the Mishkan stand. So just like Eimdim means Ma'amidim, so Ma'amidim means Eimdim, standing upright. And the Rebbe, the Freirdike, explains the mind Basi Ligani in Perik Tes. Asher Inyan Ha'amud, the purpose of a beam or a column is Shu Mechaber, there's a Gag V'Haritzba. It joins together the roof and the floor. Right? If you have a building, and you're talking at a time that they didn't have technology like steel, which can create very, very strong materials that can support very large ceilings. And they had not yet developed the arch and the keystone, which would allow for very large domes to accommodate very large rooms. So if you built a room of a considerable size, it was full of poles, columns. You have a big, big room, but the room was constantly interspersed with poles pushed to keep up the ceiling. So but of course, in keeping up the ceiling, there's two things. It keeps the ceiling above the floor, and it keeps the ceiling in relationship with the floor. In other words, it should have some relation. It shouldn't just be completely removed from the floor, but has a connection to the floor. It makes up one construct: the building, the floor, the ceiling, and the columns. Says the Rebbe, the same is true. The K'roshim of the Beis HaMikdash, which was the transformation of Sheker, had the influence in Amudim, that these K'roshim were standing upright as columns or as beams. And then the Freirdike Rebbe says, the K'roshim, which are columns or beams, are similar to mitzvahs, because mitzvahs are also called Amudei, beams or columns of light. In Kabbalah, the mitzvahs are called columns. Why are mitzvahs called columns? They draw down and they bind it in say Baruch Hu Mamish. They connect themselves with the world's mamish. So mitzvahs are called amudim. This is called tarach amudei. The 620 mitzvahs, the 620 columns or beams that bring godliness from heaven to earth. And he says in Igama K'roshim, the same is true of these boards, which are the building blocks of the Beis HaMikdash, that come from the Iskafiv, Hapcha, the transformation, B'Kedusha, the Klipa, to create the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Rebbe, they have a similar property to mitzvahs per se. They connect godliness with the worlds. So, when you transform Klipa into Kedusha, Sheker into Keresh, you have an Amud, you have something which is standing, which is Makashara Gag Imaritzpa, and it's very similar to mitzvahs which have a similar purpose. And the Rebbe makes reference. This is, of course, Eger Zakei Simon Chav Tes, Tanya, the 29th letter, where the Alter Rebbe discusses the idea of mitzvahs. And he says basically mitzvahs come from the highest level. They come from Ratzon, which is above Chochmah, and yet they descend to the lowest place. And the mashal that he uses to try and describe how a mitzvah is like Ratzon, which starts in the highest levels and comes down to the lowest levels, is like an amud, like a column, like a beam. Mitzvahs are also compared to columns, as they state in Kabbalah. Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, what does it mean that mitzvahs are columns? The will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes from Kesed. The I'm 30, the Peit Samach Vav now, the Isa B'Tfilah, so the Chunya Ben HaKona is written in the davening, the Tfilah, the Chunya Ben HaKona. Asher B'HaKesed, Yesh B'Terach HaMudiyeh. Kesed has 620 pillars, or columns, of light, beams of light, which are the source of 620 mitzvahs. And he explains, just like there would be columns or beams in a gigantic estate. Bais Chema means a walled or a fortified estate. Standing on the ground, the top is connected to the roof and holding up the roof or the ceiling. The same is true of mitzvahs that nitzav. They are standing from the highest of levels. In other words, they begin in the highest of the high. They draw down until the earth. In other words, mitzvahs, they have the highest source, and they're manifest in physical rituals and physical behaviors and physical materials, physical artifacts. And even those collection of mitzvahs which are not physical, but they're given to a physical person. It's 5 lines from the top of page Samach Vav now. Shahu Bal Bechira, that this physical person has free will, to lean his heart either to go to bed and so forth. So the Rebbe says there's a corollary made between K'rashim Eimdim and mitzvahs are called Amud. The beams of the Beis HaMikdash, which comes from the transformation of Klippa and the Kedusha, is called Eimdim. Mitzvahs are called Eimdim, and what they share is that they connect the highest level to the lowest level. Now, as I told you earlier, in connecting, in calling, translating the word Amud, there's 2 basic ideas, right? A beam of light is also an Amud. And a pole that holds up a ceiling is also called an Amud. But there's a huge difference between how a beam of light is called an Amud and how a column which holds up a building is called an Amud. And the Rebbe is going to now address this difference. And we're going to find it's going to be a little bit complicated. What's going to emerge is that mitzvahs are compared to columns, beams, that stand on the ground and hold up the ceiling from the bottom up. K'rashim are going to come to represent a spiritual idea. And the spiritual idea of K'rashim is going to be like a beam of light which shines from heaven to earth. And as the Maimed unfolds, you will see that the Rebbe is going to argue that the beam of light which descends from a higher level to a lower level is not as high as the physical column, which is what mitzvahs are compared to, that stands on the ground and reaches up to the heights of heaven. But this is what's going to happen. We're going to be comparing mitzvahs to K'rashim. And in comparing mitzvahs to K'rashim, we're going to be introduced to 2 kinds of beams or columns. And mitzvahs are going to be from the bottom up. K'rashim are going to be from the top down. And the Rebbe is going to argue that the mitzvahs, which are from the bottom up, is a deeper level, a higher level than the beam of light, which is from the top down. Let's read. V'hine. I'm 5 lines into page Samach Vav. If you examine the exact language of the Freirdike Rebbe, you'll see. The whole point of the previous Rebbe in bringing K'rashim Eimdim is that when you transform Sheker into Keresh, you get the Ma'ila V'Amidah of standing upright. But then he says it's al derech in mitzvahs. It's just comparable to mitzvahs. So the Rebbe's argument that the word al derech means similar to, but not identical with, mitzvahs. He's manipulating, he's emphasizing the word al derech and making an argument for the purpose of drawing a distinction. When it's written in the Maimon, that the columns of the Mishkan are only like mitzvahs, parenthesis, al derech v'dugma levad, it's simply comparable, it's a corollary, but it's not identical. Why? The mitzvahs are actual columns. And when the Freirdike Rebbe compares the K'rashim to mitzvahs, he's saying they're not mamish mitzvahs, which means they're not mamish amudim, they're only comparable to amudim. But again, as I told you earlier, the mitzvahs are going to be compared to actual columns and poles, and K'rashim are going to be compared to beams of light. And the proof for this idea that the K'rashim is only al derech mitzvahs, and mitzvahs are mamish amudim, is in the language that's used in the Maimon. Ba'mitzvahs hu eimer. When he talks about mitzvahs being a beam, he uses two expressions. Haloshen mamshichem u'mechavrim. They draw down and connect. And these two expressions, mamshichem u'mechavrim, means that it's an amud mamish, like a beam that stands on the ground and reaches up into the heavens. By the krashim, it doesn't say he brings down, only connecting Eidin Seifim ha'elames, and therefore you argue that it's only al derech mitzvahs, it's not mitzvahs mamish. So we have one word, amudim, and when it comes to mitzvahs, amudim means beams, and when it comes to krashim, amudim means beams of light. And this is how he explains it. V'hinei. B'tanya yesh gam kein hefresh ben hamoshel v'amudim la'nimshel l'mitzvahs. In Tanya also, when in Igeres HaKedesh Chavtes, he's trying to explain the idea of mitzvahs coming from Ratzon Ha'elyon, the whole thing that you have to have the safe darga saying safe, should be able to ramshach עצמות lamato, which is in of Ratzon, which is considered safe. L'gabe Tanya, the whole Maimin Alter Rebbe, where he explains why mitzvah compared to beams. But in the marshal, the idea is that the beam has come from a high place to a low place. And he says like this: there's a difference in marshal and nimshal. How? The be'inyan ha'amudim, when he talks about the physical beams, he says they're standing on the ground. And they reach up into the heavens till the ceiling, till the sky. The mitzvahs, and in as much as he compares beams, poles, to mitzvahs, it's the other way around. They begin on high, they descend below. Now this is tricky. Why is it tricky? Because in Tanya you have a mashal of a beam standing on the ground and going up into the heavens, and a nimshal of mitzvah which is coming from heaven to earth. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, is going to take these two aspects from the Igeres HaKedesh and apply them to mitzvahs and k'rashim, but backwards. Mitzvahs are going to become like the mashal in Tanya, the beam that stands on the ground and the height is in the heavens. And k'rashim is going to become like the nimshal in the Tanya, which is mitzvahs, which is a beam from heaven to earth. And in Tanya, a mitzvah is malmayla lamata, and in this maimer, a mitzvah is like an amud, which is malmata lamayla. But we're going to leave it alone. V'hine, shine hamoshal ma'animshal moving b'pashtas. When you use an example from something physical and you want to explain it in correlation with something spiritual, obviously there's going to be differences and it's going to make sense. V'hine, ha'amudim, when you talk about physical beams, physical poles that hold up a ceiling, Hare, it's obvious that they start on the ground. This makes them go up to the heavens. Why? Simple. This gravity. It's very simple. It's gravity. Everything has a nature to go to the lowest possible level of energy. So when you have a heavy physical thing that's going to lay as close to the ground as possible, you want it to climb up into the heavens. To support the ceiling, you pile a rock on a rock or a ring on a ring until you have an amud from the bottom up. Mitzvahs. They begin on high. Like it says in the Pasuk, mitzvahs start out as spiritual and in the heavens. And from there they come down into this world. Now there's no question in my mind that in the way the Rebbe is learning Igeres HaKedesh here, and mitzvahs that come from heaven to earth, is because he's dealing with the ruchnius of mitzvahs, the spirituality of a mitzvah, the light of the mitzvah, the holiness of the mitzvah, the meaning of a mitzvah. He says mitzvahs start on a higher level and come down to a lower level. Continues the Rebbe and he says, Umatim la'klal hayadua. This illusion, this mashal, this nimshal, of a beam and a mitzvah, and the beam is from earth to heaven, and the mitzvah is from heaven to earth, this is consistent with a philosophical idea which is brought occasionally in Chassidus. What is that? Sheyesh hefesh ben yeseid lamata li yeseid lamayla. Yeseid means the foundation. And in lower madreges, in ishtalshalos, the yeseid is lamata, the foundation is underneath the building. In higher madreges, or higher than ishtalshalos, the yeseid is lamal, the foundation is above the building. L'mashal, in Atzilus, Malchus, the lowest sphere, that's the yeseid of Atzilus. In Elam is saying safe, it's the other way around. And certainly physically, the foundation of building is on the ground or underneath the ground, and the building is built on top of it. And in Ruchni, it's just the other way around. In other words, I told you before, in Gashmius, the word that we would use to translate Amud means a beam. In Ruchnius, the word that you would use to translate Amud means a beam of light, because it's coming from heaven to earth. shalamata, in the physical world, hayesed hu lamata v'olav nivne habinyan, the foundation is underneath and the building is built on top of it. Ulamayla, and on high, it's pumfaket. It's the other way around. Hayesed hu lamayla mehabinyan, the foundation is above the building. In other words, the source and the essence is above, and then the expression radiates from it, from a higher level to a lower level. And therefore, when it comes to beams, it says, are standing on the ground. This is their firmness. This is their firmament. This is their safety. This is their certitude. The needs of David, because standing means its firmness, its strength. On this lowest of levels, the strength and the foundation of everything is lamata ba'aretz, is what's on the ground or closest to the ground. On this the building is built. Now remember, we're turning now still against the Kedesh Chavtas. When it comes to mitzvahs, he says, Faket. The mitzvah starts out on the highest of the spiritual levels. Because in Ruchnius, the strength and the foundation of everything is Lamayla, is on a higher level. So when we finish Perek Beis, this is the conclusion we reach. And of course, this conclusion is not what's negated to this Maimed, it's what's negated in Tanya Negeres HaKedesh. That a physical beam is on the ground, that's where its strength lies, and it climbs up into the heavens. And a spiritual mitzvah's strength is in the heavens, and its light radiates from there like a beam which coming from a higher level to a lower level. Now what's going to happen in this Maimed? In this Maimed we're going to do an about face, we're going to do a switch. Because according to what we said so far, mitzvah samul ma'ala lamata. And in Perek Gimel, the Rebbe is going to switch it around and say mitzvah samul ma'ala lamayla and k'rashim, which are amudim, is malmayla lamata. Gimel, Amma. Zeh gufa tzarech lahaven. The question now becomes, why in all the spiritual worlds is the foundation above? And in the physical world, the foundation is below. And it's a very simple question. What's the question? The question is, we know that everything comes from heaven to earth. Before there was a world, there was God. Before there was Atzilus, there was Ein Sof. Before there was Bria, there was Atzilus. Before there was Asiyah, there was Yetzirah, and so on. Everything comes in a direction from a higher level to a lower level. This world, this earth, is the lowest level. It's the bottom of the pile. Right? In Tanya Perek Lamed Vav. Tachten, Shein Tachten, Lamata Mimenu, and Ian Hester, Panam Yisbarach. Right? This can't be a lower world. And in every world, when you describe a beam, when you describe a foundation, which is the source of a beam, the foundation means the source. The Eibush is the foundation of the world, and then the beam radiates from that foundation earthward. In every single spiritual world, the concept of an amud, which of course spiritually means a beam of light, its foundation, its beginning is higher, and its radiation and its manifestation is lower. So the Rebbe says, I don't understand. In the whole Seder Ishtalshalus, the phenomenon of an amud is Yesed L'mayla D'amshachas L'matayimeh. When it comes to the physical world, everything is upside down. The beam sits on the ground and it climbs up into the heavens. Now, of course, we all understand why. It's called gravity. It's very simple, right? A physical beam, it's the safest, it's the securest, closest to the ground, and it climbs up into the heavens. But the Rebbe says everything that exists physically has a spiritual significance, meaning, insight, background, undercurrent. So Haguf Akasha, why is it? Of course, in other words, we understand that everything that happens physically comes according to the Ratzon of the Eibishter. The fact that the Eibishter made a law that says gravity, which is the basis for the idea that something which is closest to the ground is going to be the most secure and the most safe, and the further from the ground you're going to be more precarious and less safe. Which explains why down here the Yesod, the foundation, is going to be on the lowest level. And then the building is going to be built on top of it. But we know as a rule that the foundation is the source. So what is the spiritual reason for why it is that physically the foundation is underneath the building and spiritually the foundation is always above the building? In other words, this is not a physical kasha, it's a philosophical kasha, it's a theological kasha. Everything that happens is b'ashgacha pratis. And everything that happens is ratzon elyon. If the Eibishter wanted, he could have made on the physical earth also a beam dangles in the sky and it comes down earthward. Why did he make Dafka in this world the different than all the other worlds? So the Rebbe's kasha, let's read again the beginning. Anna, And the question becomes, in all of Seder Ishtalshus, in all the spiritual worlds, the foundation is before the building. So how come down here the foundation is below it? In the spiritual world, every beam of light comes from a source. The source is higher than the beam, and that is the Yesod. Physically, a physical column sits on the ground. The Yesod is the ground, and it climbs up into the heavens. Why is it distinct and different? Now the answer is because the physical world is connected to Atzmos. The spiritual world is connected to Giluyim. The physical world is connected to Atzmos. So in the spiritual world, which is connected to Giluyim, what is higher is lower than what is lower. So therefore the beam comes from heaven to earth. The foundation is above. But in the physical world, which is connected to Atzmos, Atzmos is dafke in the Geshem, in the physical thing. So actually what's lower has a higher source. The physical earth, the physical Yesod is Mushash and Atzmos more than the beam that climbs heavenwards. So for the very same reason that in all the spiritual worlds, a beam has a Yesod Lamaila, because every light comes from a higher level to a lower level. For the very same reason, on earth, a beam has a Yesod Lamata, because Lamata is Atzmos. And Atzmos is higher than Giluyim. That's going to be the Rebbe's teretz. Let's learn it inside. Yuvan said the teretz is Alpi Hamavur Bakama in Yonim. This is discussed in various places and in various contexts in Chassidus. Umehem, and one of them is Be'inyan Yesh HaNivra. All of us know that Eibishter creates a world, and the creation is called Bria, and there's a distinct creation which is called Yesh HaNivra. A creation which is not only a Metzias, which means a form or an existence, but a Yesh. A Yesh means an independent existence. In order for a creature, for a creation, to perceive itself as yesh, as independent, which means it doesn't need a Kadosh Baruch Hu, there has to be what's called Helem Vehester Haboirei Mehanivra. Hashem has to hide completely from the creation in order for the creation to perceive itself as a yesh. It's called Yesh HaNivra. And the Rebbe says that the yeshus of a nivra is mushush and the yeshus of Atzmos Amos. The fact that a yesh, a physical creation, is independent. Independent means he doesn't perceive any need for anything but itself. In a way, there's no conscious, there's no experienced cause and source. The reason is it's created from Atzmos Amos, the Eibishter himself, and the Eibishter himself is also yesh. Why is there a yesh down here? Because it comes from the yesh of Hashem, and again, the meaning of the word yesh is independent being. The difference is only the yesh of this world. The Rebbe Marash calls it in a Maimer Sheker Gomer. It's really a big lie. And the yesh of the Eibush is called yesh ha'amiti, the true yesh. And yes, the true yesh of the Eibush, the true ego of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was the source of the yesh hanivra. That the Eibush is mitzvusei me'atzmos. His existence is only from himself. In other words, he has no dependency. There's no cause, direct or indirect, which comes before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And because Hashem is a yesh, therefore he's able to create yesh. The Rakhu, levade, he alone, bekeche v'yecholti, has the strength and the possibility, lahaves, to create yesh, an independent existence, me'ayin. Me'ayin literally means nothing, and figuratively means, me'ayin means from an unknown source, like bitmiyah, me'ayin lashon bitmiyah. The world exists as a separate entity because you don't see its source. Me'ayin v'efes hamuchot, from total nothingness. Or k'mavur me'ger sekedich, it says in Tanya. So the Rebbe says, in all of Ishtalshalus, the Yesod is Lamaila. Why? Because when you're talking about Giluyim, light, the closer it is to the source, the higher it is. In Gashmiyos, the Yesod is Lamata. Why? Because the Maila of Lamata is Yeshus. Yeshus is Mushash and Atzmos. And here it's the other way around. The lower it is, the more of a Yesh it is, and therefore the more it's Mushash and Atzmos. So it's actually consistent for the same reason that in all the spiritual worlds, the Amud is a beam which shines from heaven to earth, and the Yesod is higher than the Amud. It's for the very same reason that Lamata, the Yesod is lower than the Amud, and the Amud climbs up from it. Because just like Lamaila, the Amud comes from the Yesod which is above it. So Lamata, the Amud comes from the Yesod which is below it. That's why it says in my Marich Chassidus, so Mashiach is going to come, Masheroz, he is Galu, Amit, Zepnim, Kol, and We're going to see the truth of all of creation. So it says in the bottom of the Rebbe Marash, and you look at a physical yesh, and instead of seeing an independent, false sense of separateness and independence, you're going to look at the physical creation and you're going to see in its yeshus its true source. In other words, the truth of Hashem is ego, which has no cause and source. In other words, when you learn the Maimorim about the yeshus of this world, and you say to a Mashiach comes, the yesh is going to become bottle. There's two levels. On the lower level, the yesh is becoming bottle means the yesh becomes an ayin. And the higher level is that the yesh hanivra becomes the yesh hamiti. In the physical world, you see the ego of Atzma Ein Sof. And what you discover then is that the ego of Atzma Ein Sof is only available in Gashmis. It's not available in Ruchnius. Because Ruchnius is interdependent, Ruchnius is connected, Ruchnius is Giluyim, and Yeshus is the opposite of that. But the Yubim, which explains the expression from Sefer Yetzirah, Machinot Chosam Sefer, in the beginning, which is Eibishter himself, has planted in the end. Asher B'Seif on Dafke, Dafke the lowest level, which is the foundation, which is underneath the building. No, it's Hatchila, is planted at the very, very beginning. And the Rebbe says, Shulamaylam B'Chinas Reish, we're not going to discuss this. Asher Hatchilu Atzmos, that the Tchila, which is higher than Reish, goes on the Eibishter himself, and Nimtze B'Chinas HaSeif Dafke is found Dafke. In the end, in other words, by Yesha Gashmi, Shein Tachtan Lamata Mimenu, the physical being of independence that nothing is lower than it. Hinehu Dafke. Dafke, the physical Yesh, which is the biggest lie, will become Dira Latzmusa Yizbarach, the seed for HaKadosh Baruch. Because if Hashem wants to reveal to us the trueness, the truth of His Yesh HaMiti, He reveals it on the Yesh HaNivra. So the lowest thing is the Kli for the highest revelation, which is Atzmas Amud. Asher La'osid Yezeh Begilei, when Mashiach comes, it's going to be revealed, and then the Rebbe says, Emes Gam Machshav Keinu, it's really that way they say. Now we just don't see it. So the Rebbe concludes, V'zeu, now we understand, Hatam Asher Lamata HaYesei to Lamata Dafke, that even though in all of Ishtalshalos, the foundation is higher than the beam, in Gashmias, the foundation is lower than the beam. That Yesh Ta'asiyah, which is the lowest, for all of Nivnu Elam Esalyin. What's the Pshat? What's the Havana? What's the insight? The insight is that the Yesod is higher than the Binyan. But in Giluyim, the Yesod is higher than the Binyan, it's above the Binyan. A higher Eid is lower than a lower, higher than a lower Eid. And in Gashmias, the Yesod is below the Binyan. In other words, the very lowest level of Gashmias is where Atzmos is. And now the Rebbe said, Mash'enkein Lamailo, as opposed to on high. It says in Tanya, when you're talking about spiritual lights, you can never say about any level of spiritual light that that's the point, because it's only a radiation of a light which is even higher than it. And therefore, whatever light you're going to talk about, you're always going to say, bring me to its source. That's the Pshat Yesed is Lamailo. So why the Eibishter create Giluyim, which is it's Rakbedei Tushlam. Al Yodam, they become intermediates to see through the purpose, Hakavana. Hapnimius, which is Lamata Dafke. The spiritual worlds bring us to the physical world where the purpose of the Eibishter's creation is fulfilled. Milmata Lamayla. Ve'er va'ar shalamayla yeser naila. Yeser. The light in a higher world is higher than the light in a lower world. Which is why, when you're talking about spirituality, the beam has a foundation which is above it, and it's beaming forward from a higher level to a lower level. The foundation and the firmament of this column or beam of light is Lamaila, is in the spiritual world. There it comes below. So, in Ruchnius, the Yesed is higher and the beam is below it. In Gashmias, the Yesed is below it and the beam is above it. Why? Because in terms of Giluyim, the higher level is a higher light, the lower level is a lower light. And in terms of Atzmos, the lowest level has Atzmos Amud. Now, if you remember, this was compared to mitzvahs and an Amud. Now we're going to compare this to Kroshim and mitzvahs. We're going to do it upside down. Mitzvahs is going to become from the bottom up, and Kroshim is going to become from the top down. But we're going to skip Perek Dal. I'm hoping to do the next time, which is the mitzvah. But tomorrow, hopefully, next year, we're going to go to Perek Hey. Okay? Now, I am skipping Perek Dalet. because it's a tifa haskola about Ermaim Rakia. I don't want to rush it. What you need to know from what we skipped in Perek Dalet is that Kroshim Oimdim is a beam that the Yesod is above and the light extends below. And mitzvahs, Tarach, Amudei Ed, the mitzvahs are Amudim which stand on the ground, which up into the heavens. Because even though in Perek Beis, the mitzvahs were a light which comes from heaven to earth. In this Maimer, mitzvahs are things that climb from earth to heaven, and the Kroshim is heaven to earth. So the Rebbe, the Freirdike Rebbe, is explaining the pasuk. V'asisa Kroshim la Mishkan atzeshita meimde. And of course, the first thing that you have to say again is that to make the building for the Eibush, you have to have iskafia v'ishapcha, which is the transformation of Shtuz de L'Ubad and the Shtuz de Gdush, and from Sheker into Kedesh. And we transform the Sheker into Kedesh, you have the Mile of Amidah standing upright, they're standing this way, erect. Mitzvahs are also standing upright. And the Rebbe is going to argue that Kroshim Eimdim is like beams of light, whether you say there's Lamaila. And Mitzvahs Eimdim is going to be like a column of a building where the foundation has been on, the building is on top of it. So Kroshim becomes a Davar Ruchni and Mitzvah becomes a Davar Gashmi. Now I'm going to say something which I shouldn't say, and I really don't want to say it, but I've been thinking about it the whole Shir. Remember, I mentioned to you in the previous Shir that when the Freirdike Rebbe discussed this in his Maimer, the idea of Dira B'Tachteinim, Basi Ligani, making the whole world a home, a garden for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through also Mikdash V'Shechanti B'Seichel, making Hashem a sanctuary in which he'll live beyond the borders of the Beis HaMikdash, B'Tei Chalechad V'Echad Yisrael, and the whole world, and so on and so forth. I told you there's 2 points. The first point is building the Beis HaMikdash. And the second point is, once the Beis HaMikdash is built, to do the Karbanos in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Rebbe says in Odom Maimorim Basi Ligani that the building of the Beis HaMikdash itself is done by Tzadikim. The Karbanos brought in the Beis HaMikdash, once it's built, is done by us. So I'm just thinking out loud, that's all this is. That we have 2 ideas, and we have Kroshim and Mitzvahs. Kroshim is the Beis HaMikdash, and Mitzvahs is what you do inside the Beis HaMikdash. So Kroshim, which is the Beis HaMikdash per se, we say that the Yesod is Lamaila and the Amud is Lamata. It comes from heaven to earth. And once you have Beis HaMikdash, you build columns inside where the Yesod is Lamata. And the Mitzvahs are Lamaila, this is the Avatzmas. So I'm just thinking out loud that perhaps this is the word. The Beis HaMikdash itself is an Inyan Ruchni, and the Mitzvahs, so therefore Yesod Lamaila and Amud Lamata. And the Mitzvah doing the Beis HaMikdash is Dvarim Gashmiyim, Dvarim Atzmiyim, that's why the Yesod is Lamata and Amud is Lamaila. So let's learn Perek. Hey, and like I said, we're going to get back. Next Shir, Bali Neder, is going to be on Perek Dalet. Once we understand that there is a Amud with a Yesod, a column and a foundation, and in Ruchnius the Yesod is higher than the Binyan, the Amud, and in Gashmis the Yesod is lower than the Amud, and both for the same reason, because the Yesod is higher than the Amud, and in Ruchnius higher is better than lower. And in Atzmos, lower is better than higher. Which is why in Ruchnius, in Kroshim, the Yesod is Lamayla, and the Amud comes from it. And in Gashmius, Mitzvahs, the Yesod is Lamata, and the Mitzvahs come from it. So the Rebbe now explains, Sha'kroshim, heim al derech b'vada Mitzvahs. The beams of the Beis HaMikdash are only comparable to the Beis HaMikdash, but they're not the same thing. Which is why, by the Kroshim, which represent the building of the Beis HaMikdash, or as I'm proposing, the spiritual columns that bring godliness into the world, he only uses the word mechabrim, and doesn't use the word mamshichim. He uses the word connect, and not the word to draw down, like he explained in the bottom of page Samachay. When we explained above in Perek Dalet and the Prakim before, the work of the Kroshim which goes on the Beis HaMikdash itself is considered a spiritual service. Like he explains about karbonis, that although a carbon is a physical avodah, the lashon from the Freirdike in his mind is achas havedes haruchniis ha'ibe mikdash hu inyan karbonis. I'm almost sure that's the lashon in Peidik Beis haruchniis. Sha'adam tzarich laved ba'eish nefesh alikis. A person has to work with the spiritual faculties that he has, the fire of the godly soul, the fire of the animal soul. So there are ideas which have to do with the Beis Hamikdash per se, which are really manifest, at least here, in a spiritual way. Now, what's a carbon? A carbon is a war between a person and an animal. And the person has a fire, and the animal has a fire, and these two fires meet, and they fire it out, so to speak. And the purpose is to take and to transform the fire of Ummah into the fire of Kedush. So the idea that a carbon is like fire is completely ruchniistic. Like he explains, be'inyin avodas hakarbonos. When it comes to the service of karbonos, sha'odam tzarich laved be'eish nefesh alikis. A Jew serves Hashem with the fire of the divine soul. Shehu eish shelamayla sheba'adam. The divine soul's fire is a higher fire than the animal soul. Right? Obviously, it's a higher fire. Ube'eish the nefesh habahamis, and the fire of the animal soul. Shehu eish shel hedyet sheba'adam, which is the idea that fire comes from the person as opposed to coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a lower level. We have to bring clarity to the animal soul in all the specific types, like it says binyan sher kesef eggs. This is in Peidik Beis of the mind. So in as much as we're talking about karbonos, which is an aveda ruchni, it's not about the physical manifestation, the physical world, but the spiritual significance behind it. Hagam shavei the gashmiyim, even when one is being a carbon in the physical world. But in as much as the physical world is concerned, it's aveda ruchnis. And as much as the physical world is concerned, that is aveda ruchnis or the aveda gashmis a carbon. And certainly the building of the Beis Hamikdash where the carbon is going to be brought is a spiritual aveda, not a physical aveda. This is not yet the idea of actual asiyah, parenthesis. It's brought in Sfar that asiyah is the main thing. It's not hard and firm earth, which would create a good foundation, but rather it's a ruchni de kaved. Okay? So the Rebbe is trying to say, if I may use these oisias, when you do a mitzvah, is a kavanah. The mitzvah is a physical thing, the kavanah is a spiritual thing. When you bring a carbon, there's a spiritual kavanah of the carbon. The spiritual kavanah of the carbon follows a pattern of malmayla lamata. The spirituality is higher and the material is lower. The physical ritual behavior of the carbon and the mitzvahs is from the bottom up, but the spirituality is from the top down. Therefore, okay, we did this. So I'm continuing now 8 lines from the bottom of page Samaches. This explains the Teres Abashem. I just want to say, Derech Agav, B'Kitzur Nimitz, that one of the features of Basi Ligani from the very, very beginning was that Rebbe mentioned all the Rabbeim, beginning with the Alter Rebbe. In the very first Basi Ligani in 1951, Tafshin Yerav, the Rebbe mentioned each one of the Rabbeim 5 times in the Maimed. He told 2 Teres, he repeated 2 Teres from each Rebbe, he said a story from each Rebbe. He just mentioned the names of each one of the Rabbeim, and he asked if they should sing a niggun of each one of the Rebbeim. Yud Shvat in Tafshin Yerav was Wednesday night. Shabbos, there was the first surprise fabring of the Rebbe's Nesiyas. And he said a short Maimed of Shabbos Baganim, and he mentioned the Maimed of Baal Shem Tov and the Magid. And he said after the Maimed that when he said the Maimed Basi Ligani, he only started with the Alter Rebbe, because by his chasanim, when the Rebbe got married, the Freirdike only started with the Alter Rebbe, not before. The Rebbe said, and I thought it over, why should the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid not be included? So he said a second Maimed, Shabbos, and he mentioned the Torah of Baal Shem Tov and the Magid. And beginning with the following year, in every single Maimed of Basi Ligani, he mentioned all the Rebbeim from the Baal Shem Tov, and that's the significance of this quote here. And after Tafshin Lamed, I believe he also mentioned his father. So he says, the Baal Shem Tov writes, the keresh hu ha'adam, the concept of a keresh, which is a physical board, which is representative of a spiritual idea, is the person. The idea is to connect the person, the world, with godliness. It says in Tikkun Nezer that a keresh is eser ames eirech hakadosh, that the height is 10 ames. This goes in the 10 spheres. Da sheyura the gufa da banash. That's the measure of the body of Elokus. Shahadam hu be'eser keichet, the person has 10 faculties, Zayimid is Gimel Meichin. And the Baal Shem Tov says that what's the union of Kedesh to connect the Eibishter in the world. That's the concept of the Kashim. You start with the Nefesh Elokis, and it spills over into the Nefesh Abahamis. To make from physical things, things which are part of Shtuz L'Yumazeh, or lahapcham the Shtuz L'Gedusha, to make them the Shtuz L'Gedusha. And as far as this model is concerned, the higher level, the spiritual level, is greater than the physical level. In as much as the crushing, the building of the Beis HaMikdash, and the kabbanos that are brought there, as opposed to other mitzvahs, is considered a spiritual thing. To say there is no ma'ala lamata from heaven to earth. It doesn't bring down the Eibishter himself. Because light only comes from Atzmos. And if you want to bring down Atzmos itself, it's through a very physical and lowly avodah, which is mitzvahs begashmis, the performance of mitzvahs begashmis. So the Rebbe sort of quickly gets to the point. We're defining building the Beis HaMikdash as a spiritual thing. We're defining the doing of mitzvahs as a physical thing. So putting aside the questions whether the building the Beis HaMikdash can be considered spiritual or it mustn't be considered spiritual. But the point that he focused on is Kashim. The board standing is a spiritual thing, which means the Yesed is Lamayla and the Amud is Lamat. Our physical performance of mitzvahs is the other way around. The Yesed is Lamat. The physical thing is the most important thing. And because of this difference, that when you're talking about a spiritual service, a spiritual engagement and involvement in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as described by K'roshim, so the Seder is, what's higher is closer to the Eibush than what's lower. But then you have mitzvahs, which is physical things, and physical things touch Atzmos, and in as much as that's concerned, the lowest word is closest to Atzmos Amos. And therefore, last line on page Samaches, Bahamitzvah, same in the Lashon Mamshich, mitzvah doesn't only say that it connects, it brings down. In other words, in a physical mitzvah, the Eibishter himself. Levisha mitzvahs heim begashmis, the mitzvahs are physical. And in that physical mitzvahs, you have Atzmos Amos Ein Baruch. As the Freirdike Rebbe, whose Yarta the Yud Shvat explains, Bekama my morim and number my morim, I'm in the Kazakh. This is how I'm in the Kazakh. The Freirdike Rebbe kochs in this idea, and the Rebbe repeated it. I remember I once heard it from the Rebbe. The Rebbe said many times. Even when one does a spiritual mitzvah, like an obligation of the heart. For example, Yediyas Hashem, to know the oneness, to know that Hashem is, and to understand Hashem. Or Yediyas Ha'achtas, to know the oneness of Hashem, or Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So those are metaphysical mitzvahs, they're spiritual mitzvahs. Hariyatzivu behem, who the mitzvah is, sheyirgishu bebasar hagashmi b'meach v'lev, that a person should feel them in their physical flesh, and his brain and his heart. Or kamei b'yirah, for example, the mitzvah of fear, shetarachlias kivus, there has to be a squeezing of a kvetchkeit, a contracting b'meach v'lev hagashmi, the physical brain and the heart. That when a person gets emotional, they get excited, the heart pounds, and the heart becomes smaller as a symptom, as an effect of the emotion. When a person uses his mind, I remember the Rebbe describing it by Fabrengen, that the brain is in a brain case, it's in a skull, which doesn't move, doesn't expand. But the more you use your brain, the more the matter, the brain stretches. But it doesn't have where to expand to, so it collapses on itself. And that's why your brain, which is used more, has physical wrinkles, has physical folds, because the brain matter stretches, becomes more physical brain matter, and because there's no way to expand outwards, it collapses inward. From one's contemplation and delving deeply understanding the Torah. So the Rebbe argues that every mitzvah needs a physical side. Most mitzvahs are physical mitzvahs, and they also have a spiritual side. Some mitzvahs are primarily spiritual, like Yediyas Hashem and Achdas Hashem and Emunas Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem and so forth. But they all need a physical aspect. And he continues. And to be sure, this is not only true of those couple of mitzvahs, that because they're chayvus halavavis, you have to come along and show what the physical aspect of it is, right? The Rebbe asked by Fabrengen, when a person loves Hashem, what physical mitzvah is he doing? And the Rebbe answered, his heart is pounding. When a person is learning about the Eibishter, learning about the unity of Hashem, what physical mitzvah is he doing? And the Rebbe said the mass of his brain is stretching. But this is only a few mitzvahs, that the mitzvah is primarily spiritual and has a physical aspect. Says the Rebbe is true of every mitzvah. How is that? Every mitzvah has the delight, the spiritual pleasure that comes from the mitzvah. In one service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So pleasure is a spiritual thing. But the spiritual pleasure is supposed to affect an increase in shamnunis, that means in richness, in fat. Or it's written in the pasuk, and of course it's explained in the Gemara. When a person hears good news, the bones expand physically, because tainug, pleasure, causes the body to physically expand. Of course, you know the Hayem Yem that the Freirdike Rebbe says that Reb Nachum Chernobyler was shaman begashmis begufim yamiras amen yesh meirab. He was physically fat from the pleasure of saying amen yesh meirab. His body, in other words, he had a spiritual pleasure that was so acute that it had a physical effect on his person. And the Rebbe is arguing that this is true of all of us. Shamnunis, gashmis, bebasar agashmi. That what? That certain mitzvahs, most mitzvahs, are primarily a physical act, and they come along with a spiritual aspect. Some mitzvahs are primarily a spiritual thing, and the Rebbe argues, that the Freirdike Rebbe argues, that they have a physical effect as well. And then the Rebbe says all mitzvahs have a spiritual part, which is the pleasure of the mitzvah, the kavanah of the mitzvah, versus the physical part with the physical ritual. And these two ideas, the spirituality of the mitzvah and the physicality of the mitzvah, are both called amudim. They're both called beams. But one is a beam from the top down, like a beam of light. The spirituality of a mitzvah is more spiritual on a higher level than it is now. And the other is a beam. The physicality of the mitzvah is a beam which is laying on the ground, on the physical earth, because that's Atzmos. And above Atzmos, the Ilmos Al-Yenim, only Giluyim. So in each mitzvah, in every aspect of our Jewish life, there are two parts, two inyanim of an amud of Ruchnius, which is shining Milmaila Lamata, which is represented by Kroshim Eimdim, and the amud, which is Milmata Lamailo, which is represented by mitzvah saying. Now think about it. Think for a moment what the Rebbe is saying. We just spent 8 parakim explaining Eskafia v'Eshapcha, right? The struggle with Gashmias. And Eskafia v'Eshapcha, the Avedas HaKarbonis, which he calls the Aveda Ruchnis, Shreiva Mikdash. The Eskafia v'Eshapcha, the transformation of Shtuz Del Yumas and the Shtuz Del Gedusha. The Eskafia v'Eshapcha, the transformation of Sheker into Keresh and Kesher. Says the Rebbe, you should know, taking Klipa, making it into Gedusha, is Inyan Ruchni. It's spiritual. So if the transformation of Klipa into Kedusha is an Inyan Ruchni, and is compared to K'rashim, that are Amud, where the Yesed is Lamaila, the Binyan is Lamata, so where is it Fakert? The actual Asiyah of a mitzvah. The simple doing of a mitzvah, which is separate from the fight and the struggle, which led up to doing that mitzvah. The physical mitzvah, this is an Amud, where the Yesed is Lamaila, the Binyan is Lamaila. The Yesed is Lamata, the Binyan is Lamaila. And that's what the Rebbe now says. I'm holding 7 lines on top of page Samachtes, which is in Peirik Hey of this Maimer. This is what the Freirdike Rebbe is saying in the Maimer. When he compares K'rashim to mitzvahs, so our Rebbe comes along and says, don't get confused. When the Freirdike Rebbe compares K'rashim to mitzvahs, he's not comparing K'rashim to mitzvahs to say they're identical. He's comparing K'rashim to mitzvahs to say they're similar, that both of them are aimed in from a low level to a higher level. But actually, they're not only different, but they're diametrically opposite. One is Malmaila Lamata, and the other is Malmata Lamaila. Mitzvahs, the K'rashim are like mitzvahs. When a person is doing a Kiddush, But a keresh means the ruchnius of a mitzvah. Nimshach gamkin hagoveya goveya, it brings from a higher level to a lower level, like a column, which brings from a higher level to a lower level. Avalei hagoveya goveya b'yesa, not the highest level, mamish, which is atzmos. Ki im b'hamitzvahs, only in the physical mitzvah itself. Bohem dafka nimshach hagoveya goveya b'yesa shu ha'atzmos. In the physical behavior of a mitzvah, you bring down the highest of the highest, that higher from this cannot be, which is atzmos. Which is the idea of a mitzvah. They come from the Eibishter himself. They connect the Eibishter mamish with the world. So the keresh would be the ruchnius of a mitzvah. The keresh would even be the fight with the Yetzer Hara and the Nefesh HaBahamis to overcome the klipa and do the mitzvah, any spiritual energy. And in the keresh, the yesed is lamayla, and the amud is a beam which is shining from a higher level to a lower level. And because it's an amud, a beam, it's coming from a high place, but it's not goveya goveya b'yeser. It's only goveya goveya. And then there's the physical act. The physical act, the dry physical act. The physical act is fakir, is atzmos. And in atzmos, the yesed is lamayla, and the amud is lamata. The yesed is lamata, and the amud is lamayla. Says the Rebbe Vayadei, Shahal Makayim is a mitzvah. When a Yid does a mitzvah, he brings down both of these ideas of Amud. The spiritual idea of Amud, which is compared to Keresh, where the Yesed is Lamaila and the Amud is Lamata, and the physical idea of Amud, which is compared to the mitzvah itself, where the Yesed is Lamata and the Amud is Lamaila. And the Rebbe explains. And the Rebbe is going to say that when you do a mitzvah, before you do it physically, you have it spiritually. And perhaps he means, before the Eibusha gave us the Torah, the mitzvah was done by the Oves Beruchnias. And only when the Torah was given, can we do it also by Gashmiyos. Let's read it inside. Hine betchila, the line that begins with the word Es HaMitzvahs, which is 11 lines down on page 7. In the beginning, Hu Mechaber Esam Im Ha'elames. When a Yid does a mitzvah, he connects godliness with the world. Shubetchilas ha'avodah, which is the beginning of one's service. And what is the beginning of one's service? Ayedei aveda ruchnis, through a spiritual service. Shu'avedas hakrashim. I guess what this means is anytime you do a mitzvah, there's a spiritual preparation. There's a focus, there's an engagement, there's a desire, there's a pleasure, and there's a fight with the Yetzer Hara and Nefesh HaBahamis. All of that is compared to K'rashim, it's all ruchnias. And any time you're dealing with ruchnias, the higher it is, the closer to the truth it is. And the lower it is, the farther from the truth it is. So the Yesed is Lamayla and the Amud, which means the beam of light is beneath it. And that's the concept of K'rashim. But then he says, after the spiritual preparation, which is creating a spiritual beam of bringing light from heaven to earth to empower you to do a mitzvah, and then you actually physically do the mitzvah, then you can't get to the Eibishter himself. This is like we find in Torah itself. There's something called Torah. There's something called Kuchabricha. Torah is Oir, Torah is Ruchnius, and Torah is Giluyim. And Torah has to be connected to the Eibishter himself, which is Atzmos. Says the Rebbe, you can't go mitzvah. The same is true about a mitzvah. Before you actually do the mitzvah, there's a spirituality. Where is the spirituality? Bebirchas ha-mitzvahs, when you say the bracha on the mitzvah. Mitzvah was translated before, and they come down from a higher level to a lower level with Eibishter's great kindness. He draws them down on himself, connects them to the world, which is in a spiritual exercise. But when you have the hachana to a mitzvah, the spirituality to the mitzvah, or the bracha of a mitzvah, which brings the godliness from heaven to earth, obviously heaven is higher than earth. And the source of the beam is the Yesed, which is Lamaila. But it's only Giluyim. Then when you physically perform the mitzvah, nods his head, which is Amshachas Ha'atzmos. Just like in Torah, there's the understanding of the Torah, and there's the God, which is hidden in the Torah. The same is true in mitzvahs. There's the understanding of the mitzvahs, and there's a God which is in the mitzvah, which is the physical asiyah. V'chein b'teira, the same is true in Teira. Kadosh Baruch Hu ke'erev v'shein kenegdei. First, Hashem gives you a koyach, and then when you learn it, Hashem learns with you. Says the Rebbe, v'chein b'chol anyonim. Anything you're going to touch, it's going to have these two ideas. K'rashim eimdim and amudei of mitzvahs. K'rashim eimdim comes first, to bringing a spiritual light from a higher level to a lower level as an inspiration. And then you're going to have the tarach amudei, the physical mitzvah which comes as a result of this inspiration, where the yesed is lamata, because that's atzmos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu eisa midah keneged midah. Hashem does the same as we do, measure for measure. Whatever he tells us to do, he does himself. It says in the Maimah Bar Mitzvah, yeah? When we do a mitzvah, we bring down the mitzvahs again from the Eibishter. Moreover, it's to renew from Atzmos. Like it says in Chassidus in the Pasuk, we do mitzvahs, we create the mitzvahs. So, when a Yid does a mitzvah, so to speak, the Eibush is doing the mitzvah again. And again, I'm reminding you that the reason that I bring the Torah from the Magid is because he brings all the Rabbeim, including the Baal Shem Tov, which we had on the previous page, and now the Magid, that it says in the Pasuk, Shmartem es chukeisai ves mitshpatai asher yasa eisam ha'adam. A person should guard my edicts, and he should guard my judgments, and he should do the mitzvahs. So you have a Shmartem, you have chukes and mishpatim and asiyah. And then v'chai b'hem, a person lives. Taich is the Mezitcha Magid. Chukei is machshava. The edict of Kadosh Baruch Hu is thought. What's the connection between the word chukah and thought? Because machshava is lavush ha-meyuchad, which is eisies ha-chakika. Chukah is the word chakika, machshava. Mishpatai is dibur. He brings it out because it says b'zar melech shiltain and melech b'mishpat yamideres. I'm not elaborating on this because I'm not elaborating on it. That chukim is machshava, and he brings a raya. Mishpatim is dibur, and he brings a raya. And obviously, ashyasa esam ha'adam unyan asiyah. Doing a mitzvah is the idea of action, shuatachlich, which is the point. So the Mezitcha Magid says, va'idei v'chai b'hem. The life, first you have a machshava, then you have a dibur, and then you have a maaseh, but life is an asiyah. The idea you have a machshava. When a person first does Aveda Machshava, Umamshech Machshava Yedei HaDibur, and then he brings down this thought through speech. And then Lebechinas HaMaiseh comes down to a deed. The person lives. Shemamshech Chayes Ba Mitzvah, he brings a new life into the mitzvah. And I presume this means Atzmos Amhus. So the Rebbe says a very interesting thing. That in Yiddishkeit there's two inyanim. There's K'rashim Eimdim, and there's Tarach Amudei. K'rashim Meimdim means the beam of spiritual light which comes from heaven to earth to inspire the mitzvah. And Tarach Amudei means the actual performance of the mitzvah, which comes after. And the Tarach Amudei, this is Atzmos with the Yesed is Lamata as opposed to the Yesed being Lamayla. And he finishes, Zelwin Avadis HaKrashim, this idea of Avadis HaKrashim, Avadis HaKrashim Shabbat, it's a spiritual service. Which means, I'm saying again, that all these Prakim, Perik Beis, which is about Karbanis, which he says Befedish, Achas Aveda Ruchni Shai B'Mikdash. And then Gimel Dal Hey about Shtus. And then Vav Zayin and Ches about Shekin into Keresh. It's all Ruchnias. The struggle of Yiddishkeit is still the spirituality of Yiddishkeit alone. Shaydei Zebor Lakiyim on mitzvahs begashmis. And you just do the mitzvah. And the doing of the mitzvah is not that challenging, but that's Atzmos. This brings down the Eibishter himself, and he connects it with the worlds. The heaven and earth become one and the same thing. And the Rebbe repeats again the Lashon that you have from the Rebbe Marash. Not that the Yesh HaNivri becomes Ayin, but in the Yesh HaMiti you see that the Yesh HaNivri, you see that the truth of the Yesh HaNivri is the Yesh HaMiti. So, to be honest, this wasn't a very hard shiur, right? We did a lot of reading, yeah? We read all of Peirik Beis, all of Peirik Gimel, and all the Peirik, which is approximately 3 pages. These are big pages with a lot of words. And the Teuchen is, and this is very interesting, the Rebbe is learning a Maimah from the Freirdike Rebbe. When you read the Freirdike Rebbe's Maimah, you see a correlation between K'rashim and mitzvahs. And you assume that the point of the correlation is that they're the same. And the Rebbe comes along and says that when the Freirdike Rebbe draws a correlation between K'rashim and mitzvahs, the entire point is to draw a distinction They're similar, but not identical. And what's the essence of Kroshim? In other words, the whole Iskafev is Hapche. This whole business is also Ruchnius. And it doesn't come to the physical act of a mitzvah, which is Atzmos. So first you have the Ruchnius de Ka'amud, which is Malmayla Lamato. Then you have the Gashmiyos de Ka'amud, which is Malmata Lamayla. Now, in the next Shir, we're going to be doing Perek Dalet, which is about Ermaim Rakia. And the way I understand it, I'm not fully prepared, but the way I understand at the moment is, the word of the Rebbe is that there's two in Yom and Ermaim Rakia. Just that there's Kroshim and Mitzvahs, that Ermaim Rakia and Ruchnius. And in Ermaim Rakia and Ruchnius, Eir is higher than Mayim, as Mayim is higher than Rakia. And then there's Ermaim Rakia and Atzmos, and Dotn is Fakert. Eir is less than Mayim, as Mayim is less than Rakia, and in the Lashon Harav, Ukefi sheyizbayah lekaman.